Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today for part one of what's probably going to be a three-part review series on the box set All the Haunts Be Ours, a compendium of folk horror from Severin Films. So I'm going to do this a little bit different than what I've done in the past. I'm going to split this review up into multiple parts, probably three parts depending on how long they are. There's a couple reasons for this. One, I'm going to try and make these videos a little bit shorter and not have one really long video. And two, I think it will be easier if someone is just interested in a certain part of the set. You can kind of, find the review easier that way. You can feel free to let me know in the comments if you prefer this, multiple part review, or if you would like to see it in just one gigantic long review. So today I'm just going to talk about my overall thoughts on the set, and I'm also going to talk about the supplemental materials, the book and the CDs, and then in the next couple of videos I will talk about all the films in the set individually. So my overall impressions on this set are that it is very, very good. It's a very strong set. There are, I believe, 20 films in the set, and I believe I gave 16 of them a 3 or higher out of 5, which is really, really good. Now, I will say I didn't find maybe as many gems as I would have liked to. I think I only had like 3 films that got a 4.5 or a 5, but most of the films in the set were very consistent and solid, and they rated between 3 and 4. I will put individual rankings for the films down as I go through them in the next couple of videos, but as for the other films, I think I rated one average at 2.5, and then the other 3 films were 2 or lower. There was only one true dud in this set, the one film that I didn't like at all, which is really good. Out of 20 films, you're usually going to get one that you don't care for. Now, there's 3 main points I want to talk about for those who might be interested in investing in this set. If you can find it at a decent price, it is a rather expensive set, and if I just think it's worth it overall. So like I said, the quality of the set is good, but the first thing I want to talk about is the packaging. Now, this packaging is fold out, and the discs are in sleeves, as you can see here. Now, I know some people really don't like this. I've seen a few criticisms on this from people about the set, but the sleeves don't really bother me, to be honest. Now, I do prefer cases, don't get me wrong. Cases are far superior. It's a lot easier to take the discs out. The discs get less wear and tear over time, and the sets are just a little more sturdy and hold up well. Although I haven't had any problems, at least so far, with this set. It seems to be pretty sturdy, at least, the binding and everything. Plus, Blu-rays take some pretty good wear and tear. It takes a lot more to scratch them. I would question, to be fair, putting the CDs in sleeves. Those are also in sleeves, and those scratch much easier, and you have to be a lot more careful with those. But overall, no real problems with that. But I just wanted to make people aware of that if you decide to invest in the set, that this is sleeves and not cases. Another advantage of sleeves, by the way, is that you can get thematic artwork, from disc to disc. And with cases, you could get that same artwork, but it kind of wouldn't flow as well, if that makes any sense. And of course, doing it this way saves shelf space. If you did this set in individual cases, it would probably take up a lot more room. I actually appreciate that as someone who collects a lot of Blu-rays. But I know room isn't an issue for everyone. So if you prefer cases, you prefer cases. I can't really argue with you. I do too. I'm just saying I understand on a set this big, the sleeves, the use of sleeves, and they work fine for me and for my purposes. Also, the rest of the packaging is really good. The outside box is very sturdy. I showed this in my unboxing, but I'll show it again. And very solid. So that's all good. So overall, I give the packaging a pass. It's not perfect, but I would say it's very acceptable. Let's put it that way. Second thing I want to talk about, and perhaps more importantly, depending on what you value in a set, is the transfers. Now, the reason I bring this up is not all these movies are transferred in 4K or even 2K. If you're someone that likes every single film to have a beautiful new remaster, this is not the set for you. I was very pleased with the picture quality overall, for the simple fact that some of these are older films, and some of the original negatives weren't even in that great a shape. They used the best source material they could find, but in some cases there wasn't great stuff to work with from a quality standpoint to begin with. Some of these films are just remastered in HD, but to be honest, I'm just glad they're preserved on Blu-ray. That's kind of how I feel about it. It's great to get these out to a new audience, and some of the films are just, transferred in HD, and they look really, really good. Now, to be fair, there are about 3 or 4 films that did look a little rough even for me, but it didn't really hurt my enjoyment of the films. I think the films that looked the best were Eyes of Fire and Clear Cut, and I believe those were 4K transfers, so that makes sense. And the films that looked the roughest were probably Robin Redbreast, Leptirica, and either Kadesha or Kadaisha. I'm still not sure if I'm saying that correctly. Those films look the roughest, but like I said, for me, it doesn't really ruin the enjoyment value. But I did notice that those, transfers maybe weren't perfect, is a good way to put it. So again, I think overall the transfer quality is great, but just a heads up for those collecting these kind of sets, you're not getting all 2 and 4K transfers. They're not going to look like some of the new modern 2022 movies, let's put it that way. Now, the third thing I want to talk about, and the most important for me, is the actual themes of the films themselves and what genre they fit into. So, this set is called All the Haunts Be Ours, a compendium of folk horror. The reason I'm re-emphasizing this is because, at least in my opinion, only about maybe 60% of these films are horror films. Now, there's other films in the set that certainly have an element or two of horror in their story, and they're horrific situations. I would never make light of the situations. Some of them are, like I said, pretty horrific, but to me, just because there's 1 or 2 horrific situations, or maybe there's, like a monster or a ghost in something, doesn't mean it's a horror film, per se. And some of these, there's about 3 films in this set that to me aren't horror at all. Like a film like Celia, which I actually thought was one of the best films on the set, but it's not a horror film. Like, I don't see any element of horror, at least when I think of horror. If you're looking for like blood and guts slasher horror, or even like, haunted house mystery spooky horror, no, a lot of these films I would say are like political thrillers or political dramas, or even there's 2 films on here I would call coming of age dramas. Even to back up my point a little bit, in the special features in some of these films, which are really good, but they talk about the films like they're political dramas. That's actually the term that they use. They don't really even say horror. So from a content standpoint, when you call a set, a compendium of folk horror, I find it weird to include films that aren't really horror, but again, others may find them to be horror. I just want people to know what to expect when they watch this set. I was not expecting so many films to have such, heavy subject matter or such dramatic content that I had to focus so heavily on. Now, that being said, I have mixed feelings about it because a lot of these are great films. A lot of the films that I didn't consider horror were some of the best films on the set. And to be fair, most of the films have at least some horror element. I would just say only about like half the films are horror all the way through, or have horror elements all the way through. If I sound like I'm being harsh, I'm sorry. I really did enjoy most of these films. I just want to give a heads up that a lot of these films are like straight up the kind of horror movies you might be used to watching. But that being said, the quality of the films is very strong for the most part. Also, the term folk is kind of used loosely in a few of these films too. There's a few films even that were horror that I don't know how much folk horror they were. But again, you could kind of, maybe I'm being too nitpicky. I guess you can call a lot of movies folk horror. But I just wanted to get that out of the way before. I will talk about this a little bit more as I review each film. But I think using the term folk horror for all 20 of these films is maybe questionable. But like I said, the quality level of the films is very high in most cases. One more thing I want to talk about in this video, because I'm already running a little bit longer than I wanted to, is the CDs and the booklet. Now, the CDs, the first one is a soundtrack for the documentary and it's very good. It's the kind of soundtrack where the music is very similar throughout, but it's very moody and atmospheric, excuse me, and it would be great background music if you're looking for a spooky atmosphere. That's all I really have to say about the CD soundtrack. It's fine. In terms of the white people spoken word, it's basically like a book on tape. Audio CDs, they're fine. They're solid. I'm not really listening to a story or a novel on CD type of person, so it's hard for me to judge this too closely compared to other ones, but it seems like if it's of a high enough quality. The narration is very good, and there's actually some pretty good music mixed in as well. As for the book, it's very solid. I'm noticing that Severin does some really great books. It's kind of just like the Christopher Lee box set book. It's very solid. It's over 150 pages. It's very thick and well put together. There's a lot of pictures in here, even if you don't like to read the material. One thing I will say, I was a little surprised. There's a lot of essays in here, and they're basically just a background of folk horror and how movies have been influential toward folk horror, things like that. It's a great read if you're interested in that, but this is not a individual breakdown. I thought maybe this would be one article on each movie. This is not that. But there is a brief synopsis of each movie in the back. A page on each movie that gives all the special features as well. But don't expect the whole book to just be like an essay on each film, because that's not what it is. But it's a very high quality book, and if you're a reader, I recommend reading it. It's definitely a quality supplement, and I appreciate when companies put these kind of supplements in sets. So that will do it for part one of this video. Overall, I do think this set, All the Haunts Be Ours, is very much worth buying. I just wanted to give a brief overview before I go film by film, because I felt like these topics that I covered were very important to those that might be interested in collecting this set. So you can probably expect sometime later in the week videos on each individual film, and it'll be either 2 or 3 more parts depending on how long the videos go. Thanks for watching.